So first thing I want to point out is I've actually started here on the Office 365 portal page. The best part about Office 365 is that just going to office.com or portal.office.com and typing in your credentials will give you access to all of the things that you need. You can access your mail and all of these other applications, online versions of the Office platform. But of course, what we're here to talk about today specifically is OneDrive for Business and SharePoint. So what exactly is the difference between these two, and how do you understand what you should use when? Well, let's open up OneDrive, and I'll point something out first and foremost. When you open OneDrive for Business, you'll see that all of the documents that are here in this library are ones that are owned by me. I'm logged in as a guy named Carlos today, and these are his files. In fact, the majority of the files are only shared with Carlos because it's his personal business repository for his files. Now, OneDrive for Business is really the place where I need to go if I want to make sure that I have access to my content. You know, Mary mentioned earlier that we live in a world today that's just requires us to be more mobile, to have better access to the files that we need. And you know, because I have just an internet connection, I can access any file that I store in my OneDrive for Business account from any device. That means my personal cell phone. That means from my browser on my normal computer. It means from a hotel computer if I'm traveling and my battery dies. The amazing thing is what this enables me to do is never be lost and have a file stuck, saved locally on another machine. So mobility, though, is more than just a phone, and it's more than just a browser. It means being able to get work done from anywhere and at any time. And oftentimes, you're even stuck in a position where you don't have access to an internet connection at all. So one of my favorite things that's important to keep in mind with a tool like OneDrive for Business is that it also gives me the ability to sync my files. So you'll notice this sync button right here. When I click it, what it's going to do is give me access to any files that I need from my OneDrive for Business account. Notice here in my File Explorer, right now I'm in my documents, right? These files are stored locally. But if I click on this OneDrive Coauthoring, that's my company's name, then it's going to show me all of these same files. Notice this is a mirrored copy of all of the files that I have saved up in the cloud, now available on my PC, synced to the desktop. So you got to start thinking, and this is an important thing where OneDrive for Business and these new tools really help us first and foremost, is it enables us to get access to all of our content. If I disconnect from the internet, these files that are saved in OneDrive will actually be available with copies that are called synced or offline copies on my desktop that I can work on, that I can change and update. And as soon as I connect back to the internet, these little check marks will turn into little scroll wheels, and it'll sync my changes back up to the internet. So I'm always able to work no matter where I am and no matter what I'm trying to do. Now, there's a couple of things that are really exciting to point out about OneDrive for Business. Of course, the first one is that OneDrive for Business is meant to be a place that I can store all of my files. So each user in an organization can have up to a terabyte of storage. So, I mean, that's pretty massive. Oftentimes, that's 4 to 5 times bigger than most people's actual hard drives on their machine. So one of the things that they've actually done over the last few years is they've tried to take people's feedback on this is, well, I want to make sure that I have files that are available for offline use, but if I have a terabyte worth of content that's saved up into the cloud, then I don't want to then have to come back down to open those files again and then run into this issue of running out of space, right? So one of the things that I really love is if you right-click on a folder from your File Explorer, one of the options here is to choose OneDrive folders that you want to sync. So they added this just about a year ago, and it's really powerful because now you can selectively choose. Notice it shows me all of the folders that I have, and I don't have a ton saved in this account because it's just a demo one. But if you notice that all of a sudden you start to have lots of content in your OneDrive, and it's then filling up all the space on your computer when you sync it, then you just uncheck the folders that you want to sync, and then now they'll only be available when you're connected to the internet. So that's a really powerful thing. In fact, I'll go ahead and click OK, and now we're set. So these files are still available in the cloud, but then they will not take up space on my desktop computer, and they just won't appear here. So this is a really, really helpful way for you to manage and access files from anywhere. Now that's OneDrive for Business, but SharePoint is really meant to be a place that allows easier access and sharing of documents across larger teams or organization-wide. So if we click back here into the Office portal page, you'll see the SharePoint button here in my list. Notice, by the way, that every page that I'm on, whether I go into OneDrive for Business or back on this portal page, always has this little gear here up in the top left, looks like a Rubik's Cube, that has all of my applications. So I can always jump to wherever I need to. Let's go ahead and open SharePoint. And you'll see that when I click here, it looks vastly different than the OneDrive experience. That's because SharePoint is a fully customizable platform that allows you to host and share files organization-wide. So there's a whole bunch that we've built out here, and just to give you a sense of what this is capable of doing, and many of you likely have SharePoint instances in your own environments, SharePoint, of course, is a place where I can build out all kinds of custom websites, but then host and share files. So this, obviously has lots of stuff here. I've got news feeds, and I've got all kinds of information about my company. But as I drill down, let's say I go into the sales and marketing team and they have a reseller site, I can actually get into my own document libraries that are made and produced as a centralized place for all of my team members to access and find the content that they need. So and notice, once I get into this document library, it looks very similar to the OneDrive experience. That's because OneDrive for Business, notice here's my command bar here and my document library here, they are actually built on that same kernel, which is really, really powerful. So the advantage of the SharePoint site is that this is the place where I can put all of the files that are really ready for prime time, that all of my team members need to have access to, finalized versions of content or series of documents and content types that are recurring that everybody needs to have visibility on. And so, but there's a whole bunch of really wonderful things that are coming together to make life just so much better. The first, of course, I want to talk about is searching and finding content. So we've got a couple of different things. Let's start with the OneDrive for Business experience first and how we can find content. Now, searching for content isn't always about just looking for a file name, right? Oftentimes, I want to be able to find a file based off of who the author was or when it was last modified. Maybe I don't even remember the name at all. I just remember that it had specific imagery in it. So how do we make it easier for us to find content? Well, both OneDrive for Business and SharePoint really make this a really fluid and simple experience. The first thing I'll show you is the capability to search not just by the files that are stored in my personal OneDrive, but all of the recent files that I've worked on. And I want to point something out here. Do you notice that when I click on these recent files, there's all of a sudden a whole bunch more files here? That's because this is not just showing me the files that I've worked or that are stored in my own account, but ones that I've worked on. So OneDrive for Business as well as SharePoint allow me to share content across various teams. So this is actually a file that's not even stored in my OneDrive account. In fact, it's stored over in a SharePoint site, and so now I can access and see it here as well. So the first thing that's really important to keep in mind is that instead of digging around and just searching for files all the time, it's oftentimes much better to click on your recent files, and then the ones that you worked on most recently are all going to appear here at the top. In addition to that, because people are oftentimes sharing files with you, you can click on Shared with Me, and it's going to show you all of the files that have recently been shared with you from other users. Also very helpful. And then Mary mentioned before that we have this thing known as the Office Graph. So OneDrive for Business incorporates this machine learning capabilities to present content that it thinks is relevant to me. So people that I work with frequently or topics, notice the star here says relevant to you, things that I work on, projects that I work with, teams that I'm working with, those will all then appear here, even if they're files that I don't know about. So OneDrive for Business is also promoting content that it thinks is going to be relevant and helpful for me to look at and discover. So really, really powerful stuff. Now, if I know what I'm looking for specifically, let's say, an RFP, I can type that in and notice that it actually presents some notes about a competitive brief inside of a OneNote notebook, right? Really powerful. Let's say that I wanted to look for something about Northwind, which is one of our customers, right? And again, it's going to show us some files that are available. And I can search everything in my OneDrive for Business account and then have that pull up. So I love that OneDrive gives me that capability, and it's important to keep in mind that SharePoint works in a very similar way. In that same spot at the top, I have the ability to search for specific information. So let's say I'm looking for a proposal, right? It's going to search and look for that proposal, showing me both the file as well as some previews of where that content is found. So really, really powerful stuff. In both of the instances that I've shown you thus far when it comes to searching, it's allowing me to just search a specific place, right? I'm looking in my OneDrive for Business, or I'm looking in a specific OneDrive or a specific SharePoint library. But if I go back up to that main SharePoint page that we started on initially, this is showing me all of the SharePoint sites that are available in my organization, right? Lots of different sites that people have created. These are ones that I've potentially participated in, or again, that it thinks are valuable to me. There's ones that I access frequently that are available here at the top. So I can also search from here. And one of my favorite things, by the way, is as soon as I type in or click in from this main SharePoint page where I'm searching, again, not just in a specific document library or not just in my own independent OneDrive account, it's going to promote or suggest places that I've already recently accessed. Notice that RFP I searched for earlier. Notice these sites that I've already been accessing. They're going to appear quickly so that I don't have to waste time clicking around. But you know, let's say this isn't finding specifically what I'm looking for. I'm going to type in Northwind again, and here we go. It's going to start promoting machine learning type content. So this isn't going to show me all the Northwind stuff, just the stuff that maybe I worked on most recently, or the stuff that it thinks is most relevant based off of my search. And I can expand that search to see all of the sites that promote that or all the other files that are available. And if you're familiar with SharePoint, by the way, and you like some of that really, really rich filtering capabilities, you can always go back into that classic search result. And it gives you more than, of course, just looking by, you know, files and time. There's a whole host of different capabilities that we can search for when we're looking for various files. So, but this is the new experience, right? Which is really clean. They've made it a lot simpler to make it simple and easy for you to find stuff. Let's say I was looking for a PowerPoint, and then I can filter down. I can see all of the PowerPoints across all of my SharePoint sites that refer to Northwind traders. So I'm up and running in just a couple of seconds. I've been able to find the stuff that I really care about. Now, probably one of the biggest challenges that I hear from people as they're working with their files and the way that they collaborate with their team members is first and foremost, people are always trying to figure out the easiest way to share content, right? How to make sure that the people that need to have access to content can get it quickly. And the most common way that I find that people actually do that is through their Outlook client, right? They're just sending attachments back and forth. And what ends up happening, and you've probably experienced this yourself, is that those files, as they go back and forth, you end up with a dozen different versions potentially in your inbox. And then everybody else may have different versions of themselves, and you may not get them all back. So how do you control the integrity of your documents? And more importantly, as Mary mentioned, how do you secure that content to make sure that only the appropriate people have access to it? I'm going to show you a couple of things that I think are going to be really helpful for you. The first is the way that we share content. Now let's say that I have this report, and right now it's shared with about 25 different people. I have another one that's set up for the pre-sales of this M400 device that my team is selling. What I want to do is select it. This is again in my OneDrive for Business client, and I'm going to click the Share button. Now when I click the Share button, you're going to see something really simple. First and foremost, it says anyone with this link can edit a file until it expires, which, by the way, this already happened last week. So I had shared this file previously, but now anybody who tried to access that link that I had created, they're not going to be able to access that file again. So what I'm going to do, by the way, is I'm going to click where it says Shared, and it's going to open for me what's known as the Details pane. The Details pane is really helpful because it shows you a preview of the file so you can see the content in there. That's helpful if you want to, again, find content you're looking for. And it's going to show me all of the people it's been shared with. So right now there's a couple of different links that have been created. The first is people who are within my company. So I've made this document shared with anybody in my company, and I have a link so that anybody, if you're a user in my company, you should be able to access this file. I've also set up this link so that anybody that has this link specifically, it will expire and they won't be able to access it again in the future. I'm going to stop sharing this file altogether, and then we're going to go ahead and start this process from scratch so that you can see what this looks like. But again, hopefully this gives you some visibility on, man, I can make it so people could view a file. I can make it so that they can edit a file. I can make it so that people can access a file, but only for a limited amount of time. Right, so notice again, my sharing here changed back to only be me. And now what I want to do is I want to add people that have the ability to access and file and use this file. And one of the things that's interesting is if you use it from this details pane is that you can control specific user permissions, not just create a global link. I want to create specific permissions. Let's say I want to share this with Dan Jump. He's my CEO. He obviously would like to see this report. And I can require sign-in as well as send him an email invitation. And I want to give him view-only access, okay? Now this is important because when I send this, he'll get an email invitation, and I can add a message in that email that gives him some context, really helpful. But he's only going to be able to view this file, okay? And so now he's going to appear in this sharing list over here on the side as we get going. It's still updating the item here. I'm going to go ahead and add one other person to this file. I'm going to add Karen Berg, and she's my VP, but I want her to be able to edit this file with me so that we can actually collaborate, okay? So same deal. And then just for fun, let's add one more person too, because this is probably one of the most common questions that I get, and that is, how does this work if I share this with an external user? So I'm going to go ahead and put in Alan S at brainstorminc.com, because this is not a Brainstorm account. And notice it's going to give me a note. It's going to say that Alan is outside of my organization. So it's giving me a warning that says that you need to be careful and pay attention to what you're doing. But at the same time, the thing that's key here is that I can share externally as long as your organization allows you to. And one of the ways that's really powerful to do that is with that link capability we talked about earlier, right? Because you can create, say, a view-only link to where they can't edit or change the file, but they're going to be more broadly available. And just as before, I'm going to create it and set an expiration date so they can only access it for a limited time. Okay, so really, really powerful and gives you lots of flexibility as you look to control and share access to these files. Now, probably the best thing that I really, really appreciate about the way that these tools work is that when I look at, let's say, this Excel file, I can open it right in my browser, or I can open it in the desktop. Now, all the files that you have, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, OneNote, those core Office files that you're using, they actually support what's known as co-authoring or real-time live co-authoring in the browser of your applications. Word and PowerPoint also, by the way, support live co-authoring in the desktop. Well, so does OneNote. But that means that now you and your colleagues can access files that you need to use and that you need to work on, and you can access them really from anywhere and co-author them. So I'm right here in the browser. I haven't opened this on the desktop, but I can make changes. I can make updates. I can open it in the full rich version of Excel if I need to do some really advanced things like create pivot tables or some really, really customized reports. And now all of a sudden I've just got a lot of strength and capabilities that I can use these files to actually do. Okay, so hopefully this has been some helpful context. Now, the thing that I think is most important is, as I mentioned before, instead of sharing these files via email, one of the things you can do if you don't want to really change the way you work super drastically is using the Office 2016 version of these files. Let's say I open a new email, and this is true for both OneDrive for Business as well as SharePoint Online. When I go to attach a file using these online versions, notice something interesting happens here. It doesn't just show me my local files, these ones that are saved locally to the machine, but some of these have these little clouds next to it. And you remember that same file I was working on before? This cloud version, when I attach it this way, and it's going to work the same way I would if I was ever using this normally, it's actually sharing the link. It just looks like an attachment. We call this a modern attachment, and it means that I can share files from OneDrive for Business from SharePoint Online with other users and even control the permissions that they have without sending these files as individual copies. So now they can see and access and work on the initial file with me. So just a really helpful tool there. Now, again, as we start to think, okay, so I should always be working in one version of the truth, right? That sounds wonderful, that sounds great, but it also sounds a little bit scary if it means that my file is going to change on me and I'm not going to be able to change it back if somebody then messes something up. They delete a whole portion of data or something that I wanted to really control. Well, watch what happens if I select the same file that I had shared with Karen and Dan earlier. When you select a file from OneDrive for Business, it's going to give you the option to view the version history of that file. And so what that means is that as people make edits and as people make changes to that file, notice that I have 3 different versions of this file that I've done in the past. I can always select an older version and restore it. I can even view it and compare them side by side. So if I'm concerned that somebody broke my file or changed it, I can always roll it back to previous versions. And that's a hugely valuable tool to help you and your team to feel more comfortable in this collaborative experience. So hopefully that's a helpful insight for you. Now I want to point out just a couple of new things that I think are really exciting about OneDrive for Business if you're a longtime user. And let's just do that really quickly before we show you some of the unique and new things that have been made available in SharePoint. So from OneDrive for Business, notice I've got a couple of things here that are really helpful. Now let's say that I've been working on this file. Again, we've been working on this whole time together today. What if I wanted to take this file that's in my OneDrive for Business account? It's now become really, I've polished it, I've shared it with a couple of people, we've gotten the report exactly the way that we want it to look, and I want to make it available to a broader team. Well, should I just share it with 100 people from my OneDrive account, or should I actually move it? Well, the truth is if I leave the team or if I leave the company and this file is in my OneDrive account, then now we have to go through all these other steps to then grab that file and put it somewhere else. So it's probably a better idea to take these files and actually save them to a SharePoint site directly. And what you can do is, this is a new capability which I'm a big fan of. I can actually click this Move To button, and not only am I able to move these in my OneDrive account, but I'll actually be able to copy and move these files to SharePoint as well. So now you can actually take files that are in a OneDrive account and copy them over into SharePoint locations. This is a huge help and a big benefit for you that you should look forward to coming in the future. If you don't already have this, or if you've ever run into that scenario. In the past, the only way to really do it was to download a copy of the file and then re-upload it in another place. Now, another big change that I'm a huge fan of, and this is just because I've personally run into this before. A lot of times I store a lot of things like pictures temporarily on my machine, and I need to pull those down from a OneDrive location. I store all everything in OneDrive for Business that I work on a daily basis. But if I need to pull stuff down temporarily, in the past you had to do it once at a time. And this is I don't know if this is a big deal to you guys, but this is a huge deal for me. Watch what happens now when I select both of these spreadsheets. I still get a download button, and not only can I move or copy those to other locations like a new SharePoint site, but I can download multiple files together in one click. It may seem small, but that is a huge, huge benefit for you if you ever need to download copies temporarily and you don't want to have to download everything individually. Now, the last thing that is new, and this is really great, is that they've actually made it possible from OneDrive for Business for you to access all of the other locations that you follow in both what's known as Office 365 groups as well as SharePoint. So this is an Office 365 group, and all of the files that are available to my group are now accessible without me having to leave my OneDrive account. So have you ever found yourself just clicking all over the place trying to find the stuff that you care about most, or searching and searching and searching? Well, now you don't even have to leave OneDrive for Business, and you can switch between all of your various document libraries. In fact, remember that this Northwind reseller file that I had? This is my document library inside of SharePoint. I can access my reseller document libraries, and this one's the Northwind Trader document library. This is the same document library that I have here, and I can still access and work on those files right without leaving my OneDrive. So really, really beneficial, guys. You can create new documents, you can upload core important documents, and you're set to go in the future. So one last thing that I think is important to point out as we look at how we work with these files is that a lot of people get concerned as they start thinking, how difficult will it be to migrate all of my past stuff there? Well, watch this. I'm going to go to my document folder here, and I have 4 different files that I have stored locally here on my desktop machine. And if I wanted to move these to either OneDrive for Business or SharePoint Online, how would I do that? Well, most of you have probably noticed there's an upload button, right? But you can actually just do this. I'm going to drag this file over this document library. And you see how all of a sudden the picture changes to say drag the items to any location? I'm going to let go of my mouse, and all 4 of these files are going to start uploading directly into my document library for this reseller site for Northwind Traders, right? It was that simple for me to then add those files to the right place. And I could do that from all of the different SharePoint libraries that I access. I can do that from all of the different OneDrive folders that I need access to. And it's very easy to just drag and drop to add content into new places. Okay, so that's going to be really, really helpful for you. At least I hope it will in the future. Now, of course, the benefit of working inside of OneDrive to access my Northwind Traders document library, the value of that isn't lost to me. I mean, I love that I can access and work on these files. But there's a reason why the SharePoint library still exists and why you can access it from this SharePoint site. The main reason for me is that SharePoint gives you a couple of additional capabilities that makes your life even more, can make your life even more streamlined. Let's say, for example, that there's this executive presentation about the U.S. agreement that we have with Northwind. Well, I want to make sure that all of my team members can access it. Did you notice that when I selected this file that the command bar here at the top, it actually changed? Now, if I'm working directly in SharePoint, I get a couple of additional capabilities beyond what I had when I was looking at it from my OneDrive library. And you can probably notice right off what those things are. Now, the first one I want to point out is this capability, which is to pin files to the top. So remember, if SharePoint is a place to make it more accessible for people who are trying to find and access content, well, then I want to make sure that the files that are really key to them when they come and visit and look for my files are easily accessible. So watch what happens when I click Pin to Top. This presentation now, including a preview of the file, appears at the top of the document library. And so as the owner of this file, I can make sure that the things that people really need access to, maybe it's a sales proposal template as well. Let's go ahead and pin this to the top. And so now, instead of having to look through all of these different files, they can find the 2 really most important things that people are looking for right at the top. So they've done a whole bunch of really interesting things that just make life so much better and so much more powerful to enable you to get a lot of stuff done. And as far as some of the new capabilities that are coming along, I don't want to spend too much time on this today, but I'll also point out that there's a new capability that if you are Office 365 subscribers, you may have noticed, and that's from the app launcher. There's this new service known as Flow. So for any of you who are a long-time SharePoint users or who are using older versions of SharePoint, you're probably familiar with the concept of a workflow, right? That's the capability to define a condition and then have an automated process execute in the background. So I want to make sure that instead of if I'm doing the same task over and over again, or I'm missing key information because stuff's happening in the background without me seeing it, then I can use, instead of the old traditional workflows, now Microsoft has this new service known as Flow. And Flow is essentially a streamlined, more capable version of what old-time workflows did in the past. In fact, when I look at templates here, this is probably my favorite thing about it. A lot of these are SharePoint templates, right? So say, for example, somebody edits a SharePoint site, then I want it to email and notify me, right? So really simple. If somebody's working and changing things, then I can have that information be pushed to me. But do you notice how these templates are a lot broader than just SharePoint? You can pull in things from RSS feeds, from Excel, from OneDrive, from even public sources like Twitter. You know, maybe you wanted to pull in Twitter messages that you had on a specific topic and add it to an Excel spreadsheet that's then saved in a SharePoint library. You can do those kind of really advanced capabilities using this service known as Flow. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that today, but it's just important to keep in mind that SharePoint is constantly evolving. Right? These new versions are are really about enabling you to get things done as quickly as possible. And better yet, they're trying to give you more visibility on what's actually happening with your files and with your tools. So just to give you a sense of how that works, I'm still in my OneDrive for Business client, and I'm in my reseller site. This is just, hopefully this is helpful as you start to think about how these things are so interconnected. I'm going to click up here in the top corner where it says Go to Site, and it's going to take me back into that site itself instead of just the access of the files from within the OneDrive library. It'll actually navigate me directly into that SharePoint site. Again, lots of interconnectivity to make my life just that much easier. So here's that site as a whole. I've got these various document libraries that are all available. But just to give you a sense of some of the new things that are coming that just make life so much better is that I can actually go into what's known as the site contents page for any site that I manage and be able to see lots of information about that file. Again, this is a demo site, so you'll see that there's no activity here. But wouldn't it be really nice if you knew how many people are actually coming to look at your files? What are the most active ones? What are the most popular ones that are trending that people are actually accessing? Well, from the site contents page in the new SharePoint, you can actually get some analytics at a high level of what people are doing and be able to really hone in on how people are accessing and working on your content. So just really powerful stuff there that I think is really important to point out. Okay, so we only have about 3 minutes left. Before we, I want to make sure that we take some of your questions here, and I want to make sure that we turn some time over to Mary here at the end so that she can show you some interesting content as well as we go forward. So let's just review a couple of things that we talked about again today. The first thing we talked about is what the difference between OneDrive for Business and SharePoint are. Hopefully you got a good sense of what I meant by that, right? OneDrive is a place for all my personal business files that I want to share and work on. Once those files become needed to be more accessible throughout the broader organization and share across either teams or to a broader department or team, SharePoint starts to make a whole lot of sense. We talked about some of the really unique capabilities there. Hopefully you got excited as you started to see the fact that I can share with external users. I can share with other people and control the access and the rights that they have. I can make those files accessible even without an internet connection by syncing them to my desktop. And I have very minute control over what files I want shared and how and where I want them shared. I'm going to give you just a couple of last tips now that we're back here on this home page. Now, we talked about working in OneDrive and working in SharePoint, and we talked about how those two things are really integrated as a whole. But if you come to the main Office portal page, one of the things that will really get you excited is that you have the ability to search online documents here from this main page and see all of your recent documents without ever even having to go into SharePoint or OneDrive specifically. And notice that this is a really great way for us to find and access files that are stored across anywhere in our Office 365 environment. That means that now your whole tool, all of your tools, even if they're stored in different libraries, all become searchable together. And you can actually come in and search for content, say search for Northwind like we did from here, and I'm going to be able to search this is the interesting thing, not just in SharePoint, not just in OneDrive, but even anything that's saved in my email account that has links or attachments in my email. Now notice it didn't find anything there, but isn't that amazing, guys? They're making it so much easier for us to find and access content because you know, this is really about enabling choice and enabling users to be able to work the way that they need to. There's one last thing that I'll point out. Now that we have this, you know, this idea, and many of you probably have been asking this question. I'm not sure because I haven't looked at the Q&A yet. But one of the big questions that people have is, okay, so you've talked about OneDrive and you've talked about SharePoint. What about Office 365 groups, and how does that fit into this whole thing? Well, Office 365 Groups, if you haven't heard of this yet, is a service that creates connections between the services that we need the most often. The reason I didn't talk about Office 365 Groups in context of OneDrive and SharePoint today is because Office 365 Groups it isn't really its own application. It's more of a service that connects different applications together. So notice that I'm in this, my Outlook on the web client here. And do you see it has some groups here? These are my Office 365 groups. You notice there isn't an Office 365 groups tile here, again, because groups are not an application. They're more of a place to be able to connect files together. And as you look here at this group specifically, I'll just click on one, I get a file repository. This is SharePoint, guys. It's creating connection to me through SharePoint. It gives me a site. It gives me a notebook. It gives me a planner to track tasks. It gives me calendars and a place to have conversations. But these are all other tools that are really built into the Office 365 platform. The group just provides and packages those services together for me. So if you want to get started really quickly, you can actually create a group, and with that, you'll have a site created in really just minutes with very little effort. This, by the way, I have done nothing to, and I already have a team site created with a place where I can add news. It's showing me content that's been worked on with a team, and I didn't really have to do anything. I'm all set up and ready to go. So groups may be a good place for you to start and help you in the future. I'll also point out that in some of our future sessions, we're going to talk about a lot of these other services that are available. We're going to talk more about groups. We're going to talk about Office 365, not just groups, but this new service called Microsoft Teams. So come back to some of our other sessions. I think that's going to be really valuable for you. Again, thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to turn the time back over to Mary so that she can review just a couple of action items with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Todd. That was a great demo, and I hope everyone got a lot out of that. Just to kind of wrap up with some next steps for you. First of all, we would love for you to join us next week. If you haven't heard, Microsoft just released a brand new tool, Microsoft Teams. We're super excited about it. So Todd's going to be back with us next week to show you an overview of that, show you how to set up teams and channels and connectors, and kind of give you like a foundational understanding of how to use this great new collaboration tool. And then the second step is please attend a customer immersion experience. This is a facilitated, hands-on lab kind of setting where you can come in and actually test out some of the solutions and things that you saw in today's webcast for yourself. So you'll get a persona like the one that Todd was using, where it's all pre-configured with Office 365, and you can actually sort of test drive the technology. So talk to your Microsoft account manager or a partner about scheduling one of those, and we'll get one customized for you and your organization. So with that, I just want to thank everyone again so much for attending. We really appreciate you coming and joining us today. The recording will be available. We'll send you the link to that afterwards, as well as a link where you can sign up for next week's webcast if you haven't done that already. So thanks again, and we hope to see you next week.
All right, thanks, Mary. And I think what we're going to do now is actually go ahead and answer some questions. As we pointed out, we're going to stay on about 10 minutes after to try to answer as many questions as we can. If you don't have a question, you're welcome to stay on and listen. We'll try to go a little bit deeper into some of the topics that we have today. If you have a hard stop, feel free to leave. But welcome to our after party, guys, and I'm going to do my best to try to answer some of your questions with regards to OneDrive for Business and SharePoint. So the first question that I see here is, can we block sharing with outside users or monitor what is shared? Can it utilize rights management as well? So first thing I think is important is that all of the things that I showed you today, whether that's external sharing or the ability to sync files, a lot of that stuff is actually controlled by your IT department and by your Office 365 administrator team. You can disable at a high level the ability to share with external users, for example. Now, if you're interested in rights management, now that's something that we didn't really talk about at all today, but I love that question because the answer is yes. rights management, and interestingly enough, if you use a tool known as data loss prevention is a tool that prevents users from putting confidential or sensitive information into, usually we think of it as email files, but it also works with documents. You can enable that for your OneDrive files and for your SharePoint document libraries so that people can't share stuff that has, say, like a bank account number or social security numbers or any other type of sensitive information. So really, really interesting capabilities there. Let me start sharing my screen here because, again, and I think this is going to be helpful, I'm going to just create a new OneDrive file or a new document in Word. And let's go ahead and open this. So this the Word client here is opening here for us. I just created a new file. Let's just so you can see this. Hopefully this is clear and visible for you. I have a brand new Word document that I just created, and I created in my OneDrive account. So I did open it in the desktop version of my Word client, and this is an important thing to point out. I showed you that earlier, right? If you click Edit in Word. So this is stored in OneDrive for Business. It's not actually synced to my desktop client, but I can still edit and open it in Word. And when you click this Protect Document file, one of the options is to restrict access. And that allows you to then, it's going to have to pull in templates because I haven't done this before yet in this client. But to answer your question, as far as utilizing rights management with a file, you can. There's some premium services that you can do as well if you use, oh, there you go. It's not even set up to do it in this account. But you can connect to those templates really easily, just going to restrict access. The other thing that's an interesting thing to point out as well is that you can actually get a premium service known as Azure Rights Management, and this will also track the file and give you all kinds of visibility and really minute control over what people are able to do with that file. So that's an additional service that you can do, but rights management, yes, absolutely works. Next question is, can external file sharing be turned off? Yes. Hopefully we've answered that sufficiently thus far. You can turn it off. As far as turning it off for certain people specifically, you know, I don't know the answer to, you know, can you kind of whitelist specific domains? I believe the answer is yes, but I don't know for sure on that if it's an all or nothing question. But great questions. Let's see, SharePoint file logout to prevent conflicting edits is now a hidden function. Why? So that's actually a good question. So one of the challenges that comes in connection to having a service like, which by the way, let me log back into the portal service here. One of the big challenges that comes along with using you know, these services is the fact that we're oftentimes collaborating, right? And one of the options that was very prevalent in the older versions of SharePoint was a system known as checkout, right? And I think that's what you're referring to when you say file logout. Checkout essentially means that you can basically, just like I would check out a book from the library, take it so that nobody else can touch it, and that then gives me the ability to control the changes that are made and make sure that I don't run into what you pointed out as conflicting edit problems. The main reason why that is been de-emphasized in the UI is because the truth is that now these services are becoming so available and with this real-time collaborative experience that you don't run into conflicting edits nearly to the same rate that you did in the past, because now my team members and I can open the same file and be working in it simultaneously. So checking a file out actually just squashes the collaborative experience. So the main reason why I think it's been de-emphasized in the environment is because they want to make sure that we are being better at collaborating, because that can really streamline your process. It doesn't mean that it's not possible to do anymore. It's still available in the command bar. It's just in this ellipses menu, the ability to check out a file. So hopefully hopefully that answers your question. I think that's the main reason, is because with these new services, the collaborative experience is just so much better that you won't run into that issue like you used to quite so much in the past. And it means, again, a little bit of changing the way that you work, but they haven't taken that capability away. They've just kind of de-emphasized it in the environment. Okay, so can a presenter explain how one can tag files in OneDrive for Business or SharePoint? So that's a great question. When you mention tagging, I think it's important to point out that I assume you mean by that the capabilities of adding metadata to files. when you're in SharePoint and you have a document library like this one that I have here, it's actually really easy to add metadata fields. So what I do is actually use the columns and add new columns of data. So you could add, for example, a person. So maybe you want to have somebody who owns the document. Well, that's actually there. It's just hidden by default. Maybe you wanted to add additional information like categorizing your files. So maybe it's just a text string or a drop-down menu. You can actually create a whole host of different types of metadata fields using these tools. So let's say I want to actually create a choice menu, and we're just going to call this, category. And we'll go ahead and add my choices. We'll call this, phones, tablets, computers, right? And so now I've got some tags here, right? And I'll just go ahead and click OK. So now when I go and I want to update this file, I can actually have that information tagged inside of the library. And I can add that, interestingly enough, just by opening the details pane to old ones. Again, this is really nice. In the old versions of this, you had to open up tons of new dialog boxes and be clicking around all the time. Now you can do that right from here without having to navigate away. We'll just say this one has to do with computers, right? So now this file's been categorized. So I don't know if that's exactly what you mean when you talk about tagging files, but you can always add metadata fields, and you can also use this details pane to update any properties of a document. So hopefully that answers your question there. Man, you guys are still asking questions. I'm going as fast as I can. Hopefully I can get through all of them. Let's see, when using Excel in SharePoint, does it support drop-down cells in SharePoint? I assume you mean by that if you're working in Excel, does Excel support data validation from the browser? So if you're a person who uses Excel and validates fields so that people have a drop-down menu, will it support that? I believe the answer is Excel Online does support data validation for updating fields. I don't think that you can enable data validation in an Excel spreadsheet from the browser, but I might be wrong about that, so we might as well check. Yeah, it doesn't look like you can enable it, but I believe if we had a file that already had data validation and those drop-downs made available in an Excel table, that would work in the online version. But even if it's in SharePoint, you can always open any file like Excel, Word, PowerPoint in the desktop versions, still stored in SharePoint, and still be able to get a lot done. So hopefully that helps there. Can I share via link email with people not having Office 365 using an older version of Office? The answer to that again is yes. Just as I showed you how to create those links, they would then it would open the file in the online version of the file, and they'd likely have to stay in the online version so they could see and edit from the browser, but they likely would not be able to open it in their desktop version, depending on capabilities of what they're standing with and what they have. But yes, you can share it with people who are not Office 365 subscribers if you want to share externally. Let's see, the link expiration for external links. Oh, great question. So the link expiration only happens when you create a link and you create a link for anybody who can edit it. If just creating a link by itself won't give you the external or the ability to set an expiration, you have to, in addition to creating the link, create a link that is specifically set for external uses. So let's go back to here, and I'm going to create a link on that new blank document I just set up. And if you're using this, most people, when they get a link, they click get a link here, and in this main view, if you're not seeing it, the latest update just automatically creates one link, right? And that means anybody can access it. Just click where it says anybody can access it, and that should then take you into here and set the link expiration. So you can do it that way, that's a great way to do it. My preferred way to do it actually though, and the way I showed you before, is from this details pane. Because when you do it from here, this is how you can add individual people when you share, instead of just creating links and adding people to a share link that way. And you can add people directly and set and manage your links from here as well. So hopefully that answers your question. If you didn't see it before, just click where it says anyone can access this link, and it should open up that pane with the capabilities to make those changes. Let's see, is it because I need to enable that? That's, I think, an extenuation of that same question. Hopefully that, let me know if that answered your question. I know it's a little unintuitive if you click get a link and it only shows you that one option. but hopefully that answered your question there. Are groups replacing team sites in SharePoint? I mentioned this before, and the answer is no. Groups are not an application. They're a service that connects various tools like SharePoint and new apps like Planner and Yammer and Teams and all these different tools. Groups acts as a connector between all those various services. So SharePoint is just going to be, when you create a group, you'll likely get a team site with that, with SharePoint as an extension of the group. So no, Groups is not replacing SharePoint. It's just to create connections between services like SharePoint and other services. So let's see. Can you elaborate on best practices for multiple individuals editing on a document? Is it best to use the view in the browser, such as editing an Excel file? That's a great question, actually. When it comes to editing files and the best way to collaborate, if it's Word, or PowerPoint, I love using the online browser versions because that way I can access that file and the collaborating experience is really good. If I need to do some more advanced features, that's usually when I use the desktop versions. Excel, if you want a live co-author, it only is supported in the online version today. But Word and PowerPoint, you can do live co-authoring in the desktop version as well. It's more about what you want to do. So that's the important thing, is what are you trying to accomplish, and that's going to make the biggest difference. If you're trying to do really complex stuff, the desktop is usually more powerful. If it's just word processing and entering data, then the online versions are sufficient, and oftentimes that's where I would go. So hopefully that answers that question. Wow, you guys, these keep coming. I'm like halfway through. You guys are troopers for sticking. I'm doing my best. I'll go as fast as I can. So can SharePoint data be synchronized for offline access like OneDrive? And the answer to that is also yes. Notice that when you are in a SharePoint document library, there is a sync button, and they just introduced actually a preview for the SharePoint sync client that works with the OneDrive sync client as well. If you don't have that that new SharePoint preview of that and the way that it syncs, SharePoint libraries will actually sync the entire library instead of giving you choice of specific folders and files that you want to sync. But they are in process, and there is a preview available that you can enable. I actually use it personally, and it works really, really well. It'll allow you to also selectively sync files from SharePoint libraries as well. So yes, that is available, and it's only getting better. Let's see. I think this was a similar question about syncing a SharePoint library and lists. You can do that with lists as well. List syncing works a little bit differently. And one of the things that I like to do with lists is actually sync them via Excel, and then I can work and manipulate them in Excel instead of syncing the list down as like a file. That's probably the way you would do that. But let's see. Whew, I'm trying, guys. I think we only have a few left. If SharePoint data is shared across a work group, how much storage is available to each subscription or to a group? So, SharePoint, it's all about what your organization allots to that team. It can be massive, like a terabyte, or it can be really small, like just a few gigs. For SharePoint, it's determined by the admin when they set up the group and the SharePoint administration team. With regards to groups, groups are based off of the number of people in the group. And I forget offhand the amount of space that you get, but if your group is less than, say, like 5 people, I think gives you maybe 10 to 20 gigs. Once you get up to, say, like 25 or 50 people, I forget exactly what the number is, but it really hits a bunch. I think it goes up to maybe 50 or 100 gigs, and groups scale with the number of people that are in the group and how much space you get allotted. And I think as you convert that into more robust SharePoint site, that can also be managed by the SharePoint administrator as well. So anyway, hopefully that helps answer that question. When syncing to a local, oh man, we have maybe 1 minute left, so I'm sorry, guys, we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to have to stop here, but hopefully this is helpful. I'll answer 1 or 2 more questions if I can in the next minute. Let's see, when syncing a local OneDrive folder, does it delete local copies of files that haven't been touched in a long time? And the answer to that is no. Your synced copies will always be made synced. They don't delete local copies based off of an activity. You would have to then go back and manually choose to stop syncing those files. But it's a great thought, interesting use case. Is there a limit to how many people can collaborate at the same time? I believe that you're going to run into issues when you start getting into larger groups of I don't know what the limit is. I think you can actually have hundreds of people live co-authoring in a document simultaneously. I don't think that experience is very good, even if the product is responsive, because there's too much chaos. In my experience, and this probably goes back to that best practices with live co-authoring before, but the live co-authoring experience usually gets a little messy after you have more than about 7 or 8 people in there, because the best face-to-face interactions usually are in small groups, and live co-authoring is really more of a face-to-face interaction where you're having real-time collaboration. So I try to limit my group to about 8 people at most if we're live co-authoring. If it gets bigger than that, then I'd rather us get into that checkout discussion or have teams work on it in kind of batch type work, and I think that's a good way to go. Hopefully that helps there. Man, for those last 4 questions that we have, man, I went as fast as I could. We are at the top of the hour, guys, so I'm going to cut it there. Appreciate you all sticking around. Sorry for those last 4 of you that if I didn't get to your questions. Feel free if you want. I'm happy to take the conversation offline. You can look me up on LinkedIn. It's just Todd Kirk. I work with Brainstorm. I'm happy to be a resource and answer any questions. I can point you to additional resources if that's helpful too. And I know there's resources here to help with answering additional questions too. But thanks everybody for coming today. You guys have been an awesome audience, and enjoy the rest of your day. So really appreciate you all.